Hello. Thank you for keeping tuned to this channel. Just kidding. I'm back. We're going to do another segment. Would like to say just a couple more words about Socrates and L. Ron Hubbard. They both operated on the idea that here's the question, you have the answer, and the answer is going to come from you. So Scientology has a lot of questions that are junior to the big one, but they're all aimed at getting you used to the idea of being the answer rather than looking outside of yourself to others to give you answers. So you're going to become a living, breathing, new kind of person, a person who has confidence that within themselves they have an incredible capacity to find answers to an enormous range of problems. Now, the educational system, which was strongly influenced by a British philosopher by the name of John Locke, I think his first name was John. Locke was his last name, L-O-C-K-E. He was a philosopher and a philosopher of education. And Locke came up with the idea that a person has no answers at all. They come into the world, and he used a Latin term as a tabula rasa, which means a blank slate or a blank page that people are to write upon to make you what you know and understand. That you don't have any information as a child. You come in blank. All the pages in the book of you have nothing on them. And it's up to school, the churches, parents, the police, the government, and everything else, books, to take you from being a blank slate to someone who knows all these things. And you don't have to find out answers. They've been found out for you. So, you get people then who are conditioned to being told what to do and why to do it. No longer free to think, free to be, free to understand, free to get answers. We'll tell you, now you go to war and kill other people. You don't need to question that. That's an answer we have for you. That's just one bad example of this idea. So Locke was a powerful influence on education. So today, if I go in a classroom, the kids are used to, progressively as they go through school, sitting there with all this information coming in that they're supposed to record, digest, and then when they're tested, spit it out. Yes, there's some classes and some teachers who encourage them to find answers and to flow them. But in the main, they are taught to sit still and listen and look and receive information and answers. And that's considered education. Socrates started a school back in Greece that was all based on helping people to find answers themselves. And Hubbard, in the early part of his career, also created something that was devoted to the idea of helping another person to become a source of information, a source of answers, a source of truth, and all the things that may be their potential. And that, for me, was the only and greatest thing about Scientology. Everything else, in my opinion, that has been written and said about it is junior or comes after that. That's its pearl of wisdom, that you may be a nothingness, a spirit, a soul that has the total potential for knowing everything, and other powers that we won't go into right now. So thank you for listening to that. I want to just talk briefly about another subject that L. Ron Hubbard came across before he decided to make Scientology, and he called it Dianetics, and that was based on a Greek word, Dianous, which means through, and it means through mind. Dianetics, loosely translated into English, means through the mind or through mind, because Dianetics was not concerned with soul or spirit per se. It was concerned with the human mind. You can't just throw the spirit away, though. If you get interested in the human mind, you're going to run into the body, and if there is such a thing, the soul too. But Dianetics was a more limited thing, and was interested in getting the mind to function somewhere near its actual capacity. See, well, you mean it doesn't? You mean that this thing between my ears doesn't perform at its given capacity? You mean I could be more intelligent or more capable of understanding things or more capable of thinking? Are you telling me that? You mean here I was raised in the good old United States with all these things being poured into my head, and you mean you're going to have the nerve to say that you can improve mind function? Yes. Yes, we have the nerve to say that. The human mind is, in fact, a miracle, a living miracle of what might be called evolution. You don't have to buy that, but there seemed to be a whole chain of things that led to thinking and reasoning, and finally a big brain with different parts and a nervous system. And there are a few other creatures besides human beings that have big brains, and they can use them too, such as whales, porpoises or dolphins, orca, which we have incorrectly named a killer whale, and then there's me. No, just kidding. I have some semblance of mind left, as certain people in my family reminded me tomorrow, March 6th, 2011, this body that you see here, sitting on planet Earth, which I like to refer to as a spaceship. I don't have to go into why I call it a spaceship, do I? Well, it is in space, and it is traveling around a large thermonuclear thing we call the sun, goes around it, and it takes 365 of our Earth days to do that. So I like to think of Earth as a very comfortable spaceship. It's air-conditioned, has nice things growing, has other people, some of whom we like and some we don't. It has places to swim and food to eat, and if you were going to design a spaceship traveling in a vacuum around a giant H-bomb, could you do a better job? No. It's a marvelous spaceship. And this spaceship doesn't seem to be going anywhere, in the sense that it just goes around and around the sun. It's going in circles, roughly. And it wobbles a little as it's doing that, so we get summer and winter. Just a little wobble. Not much. Doesn't take much. If we were doing that, we would be in big trouble. Just wobbles a little. And we hope it'll... Anyway, this body, which some people say, well, that's Phil. My calling card into life, this body, has ridden on this lovely spaceship through better and worse and fair skies, and 80 times tomorrow. So you're looking at a living anachronism, something out of the past called Phil. I'm to some degree a result of Dianetics and Scientology, and I don't want to brag, so I won't. I'll just tell you, I seem to be doing pretty good for 80. Could just be the genes that my parents were kind enough to bestow upon me and their parents' parents. But anyway, here I am circling around on this spaceship, and tomorrow, 80. I complete my 80th orbit of the sun, solar body. The Egyptians, and perhaps rightfully, thought so much of the sun, they thought it was God, because everything came from it. No sun, no life. Nothing grows, everything dies. Anyway, those were the ancient Egyptians. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. The sun is an important part, though, of course, of life here. Anyway, Dianetics has a lot to do with finding out if you can improve the human mind. And it 4 sectors Dianetics was aimed at. You, as an individual person, Phil. And Hubbard called that the first dynamic. I don't know why, but he did. Then, if me and the opposite sex, just for an example, I know there are more sexes than just male and female, but anyway, or heterosexual and so forth. Then one day I have this strong, unbelievable feeling, which I call love, for a person of the opposite sex called a woman. And if I'm lucky and she's temporarily blinded by something, she says she loves me too. That's her first big mistake. Anyway, she soon finds out that this body and her body are designed and made specifically for the purpose of making more bodies. Specifically. The parts of each body and all the feelings and urges in it, like in any species, whether you're talking about ants or whales, the body is designed to reproduce itself. That's how the species gains survival or a degree of immortality. And the urge to do that is built in whether you like it or not. We go no further with that except to say the second dynamic, which this improved mind is aimed at, is the relationship between a breeding pair of the species called humankind. Okay? They could adopt children too. Anyway, it's a pair that makes more and then helps to raise them so that they can go on and make more, so that they can be raised and go on and make more. And that's, now we've got so many on the planet that we are in the process of wrecking our ecology totally, because there's very little mind, very little reason about the breeding habits of the human race. It's breeding itself into a tough corner. I won't go any further at this point as to why that is the case. Suffice it to say it is. If you find in that favorite little city of yours you now have traffic jam. More on that later. The third dynamic is simply sort of like for games, where people like-minded get together and they start the Elks or the San Francisco 49ers or the Gestapo or the NKVD or they have a knitting club or a drinking club or a cigar smoking club. It's where like-minded people get together to have some kind of purpose. The purpose may be political. It may have to do with eating food. It could be anything. But it's a group, and it can be a very loose group or a very tight group where you have to say this whenever you say hello. But it's a group with a common mind and purpose. We got together to play chess. And a lot of groups, when they finish their meeting, they don't keep being a group. Some groups, unfortunately or fortunately, do stay together and have long-range purposes, like let's conquer the world, or let's join the Navy and conquer other navies, or something like that. But ideally, a group that's for fun and pleasure. It may not have the most worthy causes. When it's finished, the people go forth and they have it as a light membership. If it's in a church or a military establishment, it could be very serious. In fact, it could be enforced in such a way, no, you have to be here for 2 years, or you have to be here for life, or so on. So some of these contracts are pretty difficult for human beings because they interfere with freedom of choice, freedom of location, freedom of change. Okay, the fourth group, or fourth dynamic, was person-kind, the whole human race. We call them Homo sapiens, but that's incorrect because that uses the word wise. Homo referring to man, sapien means wise. I'm afraid we can't call our species as a whole wise. They are seeking to be, but we can't quite confer wise person on the human race just yet. Hopefully, with the help of Dianetics, which has to do with improving this human mind, which is supposedly located about 1.5 inches behind my eyeballs. But it's uncharted territory. You don't get to walk around in your brain and say, oh, so that's what I use to solve math problems, or that's how I make a better marriage, or this is why I eat a good diet, or this is why I like to kill other people. Whoa, something wrong there. Anyway, so the human mind and Dianetics. Now, Dianetics is based on the idea that there are things, some of them hidden influences, that can affect the perfect working of one of the most amazing creations in the universe, whether it's the brain or whatever. There are things that can affect its operation so as to make it operate poorly. That's a simple idea. And Hubbard, not the first person to do this, went on the path of what is it that can influence the human mind to make it operate poorly in some areas that may be hidden to the person, so that the person can't just say, oh, I see what's wrong, we'll correct that. Or the mind itself is having trouble correcting it. He went on a path of discovery through a lot of things, which I'm going to talk about in our next segment. But suffice it to say, in the general sense, he found that it was possible in a number of ways to introduce into the human mind things that influenced it in such a way as to prevent it from acting at its best. An analogy, or a simple description of something that's somewhat like a human mind, would be a computer, or even more simply, one of those calculators that you could use to quickly add up numbers and things. And he gave as a simple example, supposing an unknown to you, there might be a calculator that has all 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, bottom it has 7s, 8s, 9s. Supposing that calculator had in it a bunch of 7s that were stuck, so that every time you solved a problem with it, these 7s came into it, but unbeknownst to you, and thus you always got the wrong answer to that problem. So Hubbard's analogy was that there are a bunch of ways that life and experience can insert fixed, in this case, numbers into the calculator called the mind, so that it always calculates perfectly, but it doesn't know that it's calculating in such a way as to give wrong answers, because it has things that are stuck in it, that figure in the problem solving in such a way as to give you an answer, but the wrong one. And boy, plenty of people come up with the wrong answer to life and its problems as individuals, marriage, groups, mankind. We see so many cases of answers and solutions being given that don't help humankind, don't help individuals, but actually worsen life. And so in our next talk, we're going to look at what these things are that can affect the human mind and what you can do to fix them. Okay? Things you can fix. And thank you for listening once again.